Hi. My name is Philip. I'm going to talk to you today about building Twitter bots in Node. For starters, this is a 20-minute session. There is no way I could cover everything about building Twitter bots in Node in 20 minutes. So what this is going to be a run-through of how you might get started building Twitter bots. We're going to talk about why you might build a Twitter bot, what a Twitter bot needs, and also things like how to get started with your first Twitter bot, how to put that Twitter bot online, and there will be hopefully some time at the end for Q&A, but we'll kind of wing it and see what happens. So, why should you build Twitter bots? I have no idea, so I'm going to talk about why I build Twitter bots. It's not my place to tell you what to do, you know. I'm a speaker, not a cop. I think Twitter is a really interesting thing, and there hasn't really been anything like it before. Twitter is this medium where you can use text as art and get instant distribution to a fair portion of the planet. Even people who don't use Twitter still see tweets through things like embeds on websites or screenshots on Tumblr and Facebook. So your reach as someone publishing things to Twitter, whether that's funny cat pictures or things that come out of bots, is huge. And so a couple things about me. I am a back-end code guy. As we go through this presentation, you'll see by the quality of my slides that I'm definitely not a designer. But I really like text, and I like to think of myself as an artist. And as an artist, I am bequeathing the title of artist onto all of you. We are all artists. And Twitter, I am submitting, is a medium that we can use for art as well as a bunch of other things. So this is one of my favorite bots. This is Tiny Starfields. At regular to random intervals, it publishes starfields that it makes from characters in the Unicode character set. That's really great. The kind of grandfather of the Twitter bot movement, Darius Kazemi, has a bot he calls Two Headlines, where it takes two news headlines and mashes them together. And some of them are just kind of hilarious. I definitely encourage you to follow this. And then my current favorite Twitter bot is BotSton, and here's the interesting thing about Twitter bots is you can kind of choose how much it is completely bot-driven versus how much you curate. We're not going to go into curated Twitter bots, like the one that we're going to be walking through is completely run in code. The reason I think this one, BotSton down to the bottom, is possibly curated and then bot filters applied to the curation is it's too good. Right? Like if you know the song from Beauty and the Beast, the fact that they get the rhyming right and they have so many words that fit this pattern, like it's scarily good for a bot, but there are lots of opportunities to use this like basic technology of creating bots to apply things like machine learning and image filters to make it seem more human. So that's why I build Twitter bots. I think the text is a canvas. I think they're fun. You get instant distribution, which if you've ever actually tried to publish anything, distribution's really hard. And the barrier to entry is insanely low, right? You need a Twitter account. They're free. What does a Twitter bot need? Three things. Some bit of code for posting to Twitter. Write access to a Twitter account. That's actually probably the hardest bit of this, and we're going to go into detail into this as much as possible. And a way to post responsively or on a schedule. The bot that we're going to be going through is a bot that posts on a schedule, but as an example of a bot that posts responsively, this is bad PNG bot. You send it an image, and it makes a bad PNG out of it. And I think this is great, because this opens up a whole world of things that you can do with Twitter bots, right? If you can take images and then manipulate those images and send them back, some really amazing stuff comes out of it. They've even a couple times managed to get two image processing bots into a loop with each other, so they just keep sending distorted images back and forth, and the threads go basically until the bot owners go in and kill them, because how else would they stop? They're bots, they don't know. I should also mention, down at the bottom, there's that hashtag Node tweets. If you tweet with that about this session, I can at least promise you a favorite. You might get a retweet, but no promises on the retweet. And then you get bots like this, where if you've seen the original Willy Wonka movie, the snozberries taste like snozberries. This is a bot that takes a random word and makes a tweet out of it because I thought that was funny. So what are we going to do? We're going to build that bot. The Snoz bot, Willy Wonka bot, which is a real bot. You can go follow it. Some of them are funny, some of them aren't. That's kind of how it goes with bots. And so how is this bot built? What is it going to do? It's going to do 3 things. It's going to get a word from the WordNik API. WordNik is this really amazing online free dictionary that has, for developers, for this kind of work, effectively an unlimited API. We're going to mix that word into a tweet, and we're going to post that tweet to Twitter. So coding. Create an NPM package, install 3 packages. This is kind of what your dependency tree is going to look like when you're done. You only really need 3 packages to create a Twitter bot, which is kind of neat. Let's talk about them real quick. Twit is the Twitter library that we're going to be using to post to Twitter. Request is the library we're going to be using to get a word from the WordNik API. And is cool. This is one of those tips that if you've built Twitter bots, I think is really helpful. It sucks to see something you've created tweet something that is offensive or wrong or because of current events happens to talk about really bad things that go on in the world. Like you see that and your bot doesn't know and it's just kind of like a punch to the gut to see something you created talk about that. Is cool is a set of filters and lists that's going to try to make sure that anything that goes through it is something that you can tweet and feel okay about. So let's go actually look at the code. It's pretty straightforward. You're going to require requests. You're going to require is cool. You're going to have the WordNik URL that you're going to grab a word from. And you notice right away we need a key. Let's go through getting a key real quick. So you're going to make a WordNik account. And this may seem kind of trivial to oh, of course I should go get a WordNik account. But there's one caveat, and that's why we're going through this. You're going to go to wordnik.com, sign up. Go to developer.wordnik.com to get the key. And then in your WordNik user settings is where the key actually happens. You don't need to wait for an email. That's another tip that hey, if you're using this, why would I wait for the email? The reason we're going through WordNik and going with a word-based bot is this is also the kind of bot that is really easy to start with and is a good starting point. You can mix and match words. You can pull definitions. You can do a lot with just the text. So we have this permissions.js file. It exports a key. You can then use that key, and then this is basically the core of the code, right? It's not a ton. It builds a string, gets a word from WordNik, and then pulls it all together and logs to console. Because we don't have any Twitter yet. This is just us testing, hey, what happens when we pull words from WordNik and try to create phrases out of it? Oh, and by the way, all of this code is on GitHub. All of my slides will be linked to at the end, so if you miss something, that's totally fine. I have to move faster. So add some Twitter. Oh, what did that get in there? Twitter is kind of, I deeply apologize to anybody in the room who works for Twitter, but Twitter is kind of unfriendly to developers and really unfriendly to bots that act like bots. If you've tried to make an app on Twitter, you've probably realized that right now Twitter wants a real username, a real phone number for any app that appears on the Twitter platform. That is a pain if you're trying to make lots of bots and use this amazing platform for art. So here's a shortcut. Have one Twitter account, one Twitter app on your main account that you've authenticated with a phone number, and then use this gem called twirl. Authorize your bot account against the app on your main account, and then get everything that you need out of twirl. So I'll go through that again. You're going to have a main Twitter account that has an app on it that's fully authenticated. You're going to use twirl to authenticate your bot Twitter account against your main account app, so it'll be posting via that app, if you ever see the via down in the Twitter bottom. And then you're going to get everything you need out of twirl. This can save you hours of work rather than doing it the old way and having to actually futz with moving your phone number around or using Google Voice. The downside to this method is it doesn't provide full separation between you and your bots. If you think your bot is something that you do not want associated with yourself at all, then definitely pull back. But if you're okay with there being this one link between your real Twitter account and your bot, this is really the best way to go. So now we're going to adjust the beginning of our code to require Twit. And the tweeting function is pretty straightforward. In our function that actually tweets things, we are going to call the tweet word function. You see after the console.log, we've added the tweet word function. And you notice that we're doing that is cool check. And if it's failing, then we're just calling the function again and basically doing that until we find one that works. OK, so there were 3 things that we needed. We needed some code that calls Twitter. We needed access to the Twitter account. And we needed a way to make that code run either responsibly on an interval. For this project, we're going to do it on an interval. There are lots of ways that you could do this. A lot of people like doing things via Heroku. Pushing a Node package to Heroku is really easy, and then you just feed it Node index.js. You're all set. You have to do a bit more futzing with environment variables and key management if you do it that way, but that's totally doable. And if you want to build a bot that way, come see me afterwards. By the way, if you have any interest in building Twitter bots, feel free to come see me afterwards. I'd love to help you get started. But the way that I find is absolutely easiest, like dirt easiest, is get yourself a tiny little server on DigitalOcean or Amazon EC2 or whatever, and then just use cron. So Snozbot, as an example, runs on the 13th minute of every hour, and it's just running Node.js index.js. And the great thing about this is I can just kind of SCP the whole thing up to my server. I don't need to worry about Git pulling or correct management or everything. It just kind of goes. And this isn't, like, the other great thing about Twitter bots, for me, is I spend most of my day working on enterprise web applications, which is great. I love building web applications, enterprise notwithstanding. Twitter bots are just like the time from start to I have put something out there in the world is shorter than any other thing I have ever worked on. It's amazing. If it fails, it doesn't matter. It's just a Twitter bot. You could just send it manually from your laptop, which is also a totally valid strategy. You could just have it running on cron in your laptop, and then it'll run whenever your laptop has an internet connection. And that's kind of it. So we'll talk a little bit about where we go from here. Obviously, the great next step would be adding some interactivity. So if somebody asks you, so if somebody ats your bot, you could respond to that. The easiest way to do that is on that same interval, poll Twitter for any tweets that contain @ your bot name, and then create a response to them. There's probably a way to do that more real-timey using the Stream API, but that's definitely outside the scope of this small talk. If you could figure out a way of doing bot networks, I think that would be really neat. You know, I talked about doing image bots talking to image bots, but you could also do text bots talking to text bots and kind of build this network that communicates with each other. Again, Twitter is this medium where it's basically free exchange of text messages across the wire that other people can watch the conversation happening, and there's a lot of really interesting artistic and even like application notifications that can come out of that. I was talking to somebody earlier where there's a sticker printing service mostly in Europe, I don't think it's as big in the US, where you give it your Twitter handle when you place an order, and it gives you updates via Twitter on how your order is progressing, rather than sending you an email or something like that and clogging your inbox. That's amazing. With what I've shown you, you could add that to your app really easily. So, go forth and bot. Bots are fun, hopefully straightforward. I'm deliberately not saying easy because, like, who am I to judge what easy is, but I think they're hopefully straightforward. And they are definitely art. Don't let anybody tell you that Twitter bots or anything that you make that you think is art isn't art. As a reminder, bots need a bit of code for posting to Twitter, write access to a Twitter account, and a way to post responsively or on a schedule. I will also say that the world needs your Twitter bot. This is kind of an adaptation of the NaNoWriMo National Novel Writing Month motto of the world needs your novel. The world needs your Twitter bot. There are ideas in this room that no one has ever thought of for doing things with Twitter. Please do them. Anything that we can do to enrich the ecosystem is amazing. And additionally, I'll throw out there that the step between a Twitter bot and a Slack bot is basically like 2 lines of code. And I think there's a huge field in adding, I hate using the word delight, but adding delight to your work interactions by having bots that just kind of randomly tweet uplifting messages to your Slack channels. I've built one for a Slack group that I'm in that people who opt in, it like 3 times a day sends them messages like, you look nice today, or somebody misses you right now. And so doing those kind of interesting things just to like use bots to add more happiness to your day is what excites me about Twitter and Slack bots. Two sets of credits. Erin McKean is the founder of WordNick. She kind of got me on the path to TwitterBots, and she's also an awesome person. Please support WordNick. And then Darius Kazemi at Tiny Subversions on Twitter. There's a good chance that some of you have probably come across his work if you're in this room asking about TwitterBots. He is incredible when it comes to this stuff. His GitHub is just full of resources for bots of all descriptions. He also runs NaNoGenMo, National Novel Generating Month, which is kind of taking the TwitterBot idea and then making 50,000 word novels out of it. Yeah, sounds ambitious, right? I will also say that I gave this talk, you can too. I did not start this year as an expert on TwitterBots. I'm still not an expert on TwitterBots. You can tell because I'm way under time. If you want to take this and run with it, that's great. Feel free to submit it to other conferences. Feel free to give talks about it. You should feel free to submit talks about anything that you want to. Slides are there. Code is at github.com/fully-needed-snoshbot. And I'm going to end it there. I'll take questions, though. Anybody have any questions? Yeah. Okay, I'll repeat the question. Why did I choose Twit over the other Twitter libraries that are on NPM? There are lots of Twitter client libraries on NPM. Twit is in many ways the most straightforward. It's the one that was introduced to me, and so I didn't have a strong desire to question or change it. If you find another Twitter library that on NPM that works for you, that's fine. They basically all do the same thing. Any other questions? Yeah, in the back. Yeah, absolutely. I might try to tweet on my timeline with this hashtag a link to that bot making tutorial, which is actually in Python, not Node, for this conference, unfortunately. But that she goes into a ton of detail and kind of walks you through the whole step for building a Twitter bot in Python. And that's kind of the great things about Twitter bots is if there is a language that doesn't have a Twitter library, I haven't found it, so you can build them in whatever language makes the most sense for you and deploy them however makes the most sense for you. They're just really great kind of self-contained projects. Any other questions? Yeah.
Question. I've heard that some people say that new apps are going to be text-based when they phone, like messaging.
Yeah.
Text to some app and get some response back. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I actually think that that is going to grow a ton. I think that the fact that we see major... So to repeat the question, he asked... I'm going to paraphrase. Feel free to like nod or tell me, no, you got it completely wrong. What do I think about the fact that apps are going to become more text-based or more messaging-based? Is that like a fair paraphrase? Cool. I think it's an incredibly important step in how, in like user interface design, and if it might be a logical leap to think of text interfaces, especially messaging interfaces, as user interfaces, but they completely are. If you think about, I mean, like, show of hands, how many people in this room have used Slack? Yeah, okay, that's the answer I was expecting. When you log into Slack for the first time, Slackbot asks you these questions, and then answering those questions fills in your user profile on Slack. That is 100% user interface design. It's kind of brilliant user interface design, and I think we're going to start seeing more companies adopting those kind of interfaces. There's another company called Clara, which is supposed to be managing your schedule completely through email. I think right now they're mainly human powered, where there's like an actual human trying to match you and do meetings and that sort of thing. But they're getting to the point where eventually you're going to send an email to a robot that knows about your calendar and it's going to try to match make meetings for you, right? So piggybacking interfaces off of these technologies that we've used and we've known about for years, I think is going to be really powerful. I think it's going to change the way that we do some things in the workplace as well. Like, another show of hands, how many people here have chat ops in some form in their company where you can like issue commands to your chatbot and it does something with your servers or your internal environment? Yeah. So if you're using chat ops, that is user interface through text messaging, right? Or through Slack messaging or through IRC messaging. I think that there is definitely a line between this kind of work with Twitter bots and Slack bots and those kind of interfaces. And I think that there is a chance for us to be building really interesting generative art through these kind of interfaces where like a bot is asking you questions and building a story or playing a game out of it. and to be building text-based interfaces that are in many ways richer because like you can talk like a human. You know, natural language processing is getting to the point where you can issue commands in a sentence that makes sense to you, and the computer can understand what you mean. I think this flashing light means I'm over time? Yeah, great. So if you have any other questions, I will happily take them off. And thank you all so much for coming. Oh, I'm giving a talk tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. on rebuilding the ship as it sails, responsifying large legacy sites. The company that I work for, Eventbrite, we rebuilt most of our site as responsive over the course of a month, 113 pages that we responsified in a month, no downtime. If that sounds interesting to you, I think it's even in this room tomorrow at 9 a.m. So come see that and feel free to come talk to me. Cheers.